Hey folks, welcome back to the Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and yes, once again, I'm excited because it's time for one of our brand new programs, a part of our brand new series entitled My Story, My Words, where obviously, as you can assume, that's allowing someone to tell their story in their own words, in their own way. And I'm extremely excited about today's guest. His name is Mark Barber, and you have to put the A in there so you can distinguish him from a few other Mark Barbers in Facebook land or wherever you are on social media. But Mark Barber is a longtime friend of the program, a humongous supporter. I consider him to be a great friend of mine. He's one of those guys who have given me shout outs. I've given him shout outs. I've gotten these random phone calls when I've been in the hospital, and it'd be Mark on the other end. That's a huge supporter there, and I'm so thankful for what he's done for me in the past, and I really appreciate that. But the big thing about Mark is not just what he does for other people, it's what he's been able to do for himself and his family, and that he is a survivor. He is a warrior. As a matter of fact, one special thing that we'll try to mention in a moment, if we can work it in, is Mark happens to be a second generation. I said second generation heart transplant recipient. He is a heart transplant recipient himself, and his father was as well. As a matter of fact, his father was one of the pioneers upon whose shoulders we stand today and why we live, that really paved the way for us. And he'll bring a little bit of that up in just a moment. But nonetheless, Mark, again, a great friend. I appreciate you being here with me today. And if you would, and you don't mind, how about share a little bit about yourself with our audience?
My pleasure. So I grew up in athlete and was athletic my whole life. Did track and field in high school, got a scholarship to college, doing marathons and cross country. After college, I always stayed athletic, doing either running or cycling. And then in the past 5 years prior to my illness, I was really into triathlons and cycling. So when I turned 45, I had done a 100-mile bike race and finished in the top 200 people out of 600. I think my exact place is about 160th. And was not feeling well after. I was coughing a lot and just felt bad. Like I had a lot of congestion in my lungs and was really sluggish. And that wasn't normal for me because I've always been in shape. So I took it easy for a couple days, but my coughing got worse and my wife insisted I go to the ER. So I'm a little bit of a stubborn kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I went to an urgent care instead. And it took me 10 minutes to walk 100 feet from my car to the front door of the urgent care because I would get so winded after walking. And when I got in, they saw how gray I was with my complexion and immediately put me in a wheelchair and just bypassed everyone else. Did an EKG, did x-rays, and told me that I was in heart, liver, and kidney failure. And I was like, wait, what? And like, yeah, we're transferring you to the hospital immediately. And I'm like, no, that's okay. I'll drive over. And like, that's not an option. An ambulance is on the way. And I'm like, whoa. So they put me in an ambulance a couple minutes later, and I was at the hospital within minutes. And sure enough, I was in heart, liver, and kidney failure. And as many of you who have had heart transplants know about the term ejection fraction. Mm-hmm. My ejection fraction was 8. to 10. So my heart was barely working. And they said the only reason why I was alive was because I was in such good shape from being an athlete.
Right.
And the hospital I was at was not equipped to handle somebody with a heart issue like mine. So I had to get transferred to a hospital an hour away because there were no beds at the nearest hospital that could handle me. Mm-hmm. And I was there for 2 days where they stabilized me. And once I was on, I think it was dobutamine, was one of the 13 IV drugs that I was on. My heart started to stabilize, and then my kidneys and liver started working on their own again. And I was told then, with my mother and wife in the room, that I needed a heart transplant.
Okay, so stop right there for just a minute.
Yeah.
For all the potential races, whether it be swimming, I know you've done biking, swimming, foot race, everything that you've ever competed in and possibly won. Congratulations on that. But let me say this, you have absolutely won this right here, and that is the shocker of the century. A guy goes in, he's an athlete, he's just really competed in a race like the day or so before, done very well.
4 days before.
Yeah, and then to hear that you're not just in heart failure or liver failure or kidney failure, but all three. You win.
Yep.
The rest of us need to bow out. You win that right there. Now, tell me a little bit about this, because I've already kind of hinted at the fact that you're familiar with heart transplant, unfortunately, because of your father, and you can tell us about him in a moment.
Correct.
But so you're being told this quickly that transplant is going to be your option.
Right. So I was told by the doctors that the only option for me to survive would be a heart transplant. Do I want to proceed?
Right.
So I looked at my wife and I looked at my mother, and it took me about half a second to say, yes, I want to proceed.
Right. And that's twofold, I assume. One, you saw your father go through it and have some success, but two, you also know there are no options here, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So now maybe I go to the backstory with my father.
Yes, please share that.
So my father was a lifelong athlete and marathon runner and ultra marathoner. He ran races up to 50 miles. And when he was 43 years old, he got pneumonia after running a 50-mile race on Thanksgiving morning in 1981, and went to the hospital because of the pneumonia. And it turned out that he had what they then diagnosed him with as viral cardiomyopathy. And at the time, they just gave him medication to help him get better, because back in 1981, heart transplants were a very experimental procedure in the U.S. And his condition deteriorated over the next year and a half. And at that point, he was told that the only option for him to live would be a heart transplant. And because it was an experimental surgery, insurance didn't cover it. So my father was a teacher and very active in our community as a baseball coach and just very known through our community in our town. And a family friend held a fundraiser and advertised it all over town with billboards on all of the corners of the major intersections of the roads with a thermometer to raise, I think they had to raise $50,000 that we had to pay out of pocket in order for him to be able to get the transplant. And they raised the money, and then on July 12th, it was in July of July of 1983, my father received his heart. And at that time, he had to stay in a hermetically sealed room where if you were to enter it, you had to wear like a biohazard suit and gloves, and you couldn't touch him. And I could only see him through two windows. I was unable to actually go in the room with him. And there was an exercise bike next to his bed that he was able to start pedaling on 3 days after transplant. And he had to live in an apartment in New Jersey because he was transplanted at Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City, which is now New York Presbyterian, because I grew up on Long Island in New York. And he had to stay within an hour of the hospital. And where we lived on Long Island was an hour and a half away. So he couldn't come home right after transplant. He had to wait 4 months living in this apartment. And so basically my father was 45 years old when he received his heart, and I was 11 years old at the time. My father ultimately lived 12 years with his heart. He had an amazing life with his 12 bonus years, giving back to the community, counseling pre- and post-transplant patients, became a member of our school board, a deacon in his church, started a mall walking program, he was involved in Boy Scouts. He did everything he could to give back because he was so grateful for his new lease on life.
Right.
And when he got sick again at 12 years, he was put back on the transplant list. Now, at the time, UNOS was a very new organization, and we all know about UNOS, how they manage all of the OPOs throughout the country, and they set the rules about what the transplant guidelines are.
Right. United Network for Organ Sharing, if anyone wonders.
Correct. So my father actually worked with UNOS on what guidelines should be, and with the OPO in New York. So he was very close with the people who were making decisions on organ allocation. So when my father was listed for transplant, he was high on the list, and he finally did get a call for a heart, but he passed up the heart because he was counseling at the time several young people in their 20s that were waiting. And ultimately, the heart he gave up went to one of those people. And he didn't get another call. So he had his 12 years. They were amazing. And I grew up knowing that every day with him was a bonus day.
Right. Absolutely.
And my older sister and younger brother and sister that are twins, we had all these great experiences with him. My father got to see me go to college on a track scholarship. My father, being on the school board, handed my younger brother and sister their diplomas when they graduated high school. He saw my sister go off to college. So there are all these wonderful family experiences that happened all because of his anonymous donor, who happened to be a 20-year-old female from the state of Maine. And I've since tried contacting the donor family, but because his case is so old, the OPO in New England Donor Services is the OPO that the heart came from. They don't have records going back that far. So his donor will remain anonymous, but I got 12 extra years with my father because of it.
Absolutely.
So I grew up with Transplant as part of my life, and I always knew that it would give this amazing opportunity for you to live a great life after. So when I was faced with that question, do I want to proceed, it wasn't even something for me to think about. I knew it was the right thing for me to say yes. And my wife and mother just nodded their heads like, yes, that's the right decision.
And you've got a son as well that you know is going to either miss out on or receive similar experiences to what you did.
Correct. So ultimately, I waited 8 months for my transplant. I happened to be 45 when I got my new heart, the same age as my father, and my son was 11 when I received my heart.
I didn't put all that math together. Wow.
Yeah, the exact same ages as when my father got his. And the exact scenario of me being an athlete, my father was an athlete.
Right. Well, the gift that your father received was obviously great. The gift that he gave to me was greater. And then now you continue to give as well. I know and we haven't even got to much of your story yet, but the opportunities that you're able to give back, it's no wonder that you're not, that you are the person that you are, and how thankful and appreciative and giving and offering that you are. I'm saying you're all of that. And you've been an inspiration to me. And so what I've known.
I appreciate that, Jim.
What I've known for a while is go ahead.
No, you've been an inspiration to me.
Yes, and then what I've known for a while is that part of the inspiration I'm receiving from you come from your dad, because he's the answer to a lot of us. Not just in the fact of what he did and you're telling us, but the fact, again, he was kind of one of those pioneers in the early days that went through some things that you and I couldn't imagine, that sets a stage for all of us. So that's how you were introduced to Transplant. That's my main and next question, and you were introduced long before you heard those words yourself. So you're actually, we're up to the point you're in a room, they're telling you need a transplant. You can't even hesitate. You already know the answer to that. How long did you wait? Did you just say something about 8 months? How long did you wait from that point?
It was 8 months that I waited. And I got the call from my heart at 1:07 in the morning on June 3rd of 2016.
Yeah.
And after waiting 8 months for a heart, I was told my wait could be up to 2 years. because I'm almost 6'4", and I weighed at the time 225.
Right.
And the taller and heavier you are, the longer you wait, because you need a heart that will fit into your chest cavity. So the heart of somebody who's 5'1" isn't going to be strong enough to pump the blood from my feet all the way up to my head.
Right.
So you have to get the right heart. And I ultimately received the heart of a 30-year-old male who I found out later through one of the physician assistants who was there for the organ recovery, who was an athlete. He was very muscular, and it was just a perfect fit for me.
Absolutely. Well, I remember something about those days. I remember you getting the call, and I remember staying up most of the night and on to the next day, waiting to hear that, you know, that it was a go and that it was successful and all of that. So definitely a great day for a lot of people. And again, although it's reflective of what you did as a boy, it's a wonderful story that continues today because of that. Well, let me ask you another question, a little bit past that. So you're transplanted, obviously. How has your recovery been? I know you got a lot to say here, but how has your recovery been overall?
So the day after transplant, when I opened my eyes, it was as if somebody had flipped a switch and I was alive again. Mm-hmm. I felt amazing. And I walked the day after, and I was released from the hospital 13 days later with no real complications. There was a minor little issue, but nothing that no major issues. Mm-hmm. I got home, was immediately walking. I was back to riding my bicycle 20 miles a day, 3 days a week, 8 weeks after transplant. And I ran my first 5K race 4 months after transplant, which was called the Run for Life. And that was put on by Life Alliance, which is the OPO for the Miami area. Mm-hmm. And I met the head of their community outreach team, and that's how I became a volunteer to go to hospitals and counsel patients waiting for hearts and that were post-transplant, as well as doing public speaking to schools, large groups, to medical professionals. So my first year was amazing, absolutely perfect, not one thing wrong. I had a level 1 rejection on one of my biopsies, but that's to be expected and it's not a big deal. During my second year, I was hospitalized 2 or 3 times for arrhythmias and some strange issues going on with the heart that were causing me to pass out. Mm-hmm. So I had something called a loop recorder put in. It's a device that actually just records my heart data and wirelessly sends it to my doctor. So picture, it's not a pacemaker where it actually can shock my heart into rhythm. It only records data. It's like a flash drive right under the skin.
Right.
So my second year had hiccups in it. My third year was amazing. I was in absolutely fantastic shape. I got to go to the Transplant Games of America, which is an Olympic type games for transplant recipients, where they had 4,000 transplant recipients competing. And I competed in cycling events. I did a triathlon and swimming events. And I won a silver and a bronze medal there. And then last year in 2020, I was actually hospitalized 104 days, all for non-heart related issues.
Right.
I ended up having some back issues, and I had a herniated disc in my neck from a fall I had because of dehydration, and I herniated a disc in my lower back. So in May of last year, I had to have a disc in my neck fused, and when I woke up after recovery, I felt great. I ate my lunch, felt perfect. The next thing I knew, I woke up, I was intubated, and my hands were tied to the side of the bed. And apparently what happened is an hour or so after I had eaten my lunch, my left lung collapsed and I coded. So my heart had stopped for about 5 minutes, and a tech had walked into the room to take my temperature and vitals and yelled for my nurse. Her name was Sasha, and she came running in, hurtled onto my bed, landed on top of me, and immediately started doing chest compressions and got my heart beating through chest compressions and brought me back.
Oh.
And because of that, I had to stay in the hospital for an additional 45 to 50 days for rehabilitation and physical therapy.
I remember that time vividly. Not that anything is routine about neck surgery. I didn't think that at all, but I remember in and around the time of your surgery, I kind of maybe did a shout out, hey, be praying for Mark. He's going to have some neck surgery and, these issues, and he'll be fine. And then I get the word of what had happened, and I was just so terrified because I was like, how can he have done everything he's done, and then this happened? How can this turn this way? And I was definitely praying for you and pulling for you, but at the same time, I'm going to be honest with you today, like I hadn't before. I was kind of doubting you too. I thought that was it. I really thought you had found a way out of this world, but I'm thankful you didn't.
Since I was diagnosed with my heart issue, I've coded 5 or 6 times. So I'm a very fortunate person, and I have some angels watching over me.
Absolutely.
And I consider nurses angels because they've saved my life on multiple times. And then at the end of the year, I had another fall in my house due to just a syncope episode where I got dizzy and fell. Mm-hmm. And on that fall, I herniated a disc in my lower back. And that kept me hospitalized for 55 days. And I had to do rehabilitation in the hospital, learning to walk again. It was a whole mess. Mm-hmm. But not heart related. My heart was perfect.
Yeah.
All year, my heart was perfect. And then I came home, my back was still bothering me, so I've been getting these shots in my lower back that are pain blocks. And end of December, I had another fall in my house due to dehydration that where I hit my head and I twisted my back. And this was just a few days after I had had one of those pain block injections. So my back had just started feeling better. And that hospital stay was 6 to 7 days. That's what put me over 100 days. And then 10 days ago, in the new year, I had another pain block injection that went beautifully. The next day, I woke up, zero pain whatsoever, and I've been exercising on our Peloton bike that my wife has here in the house. It's like an exercise bike with a monitor on it that you can do classes or just watch scenery go by. And I'm building my endurance back up so I could get back to riding my bike outside, which I love to do.
God.
And I'm waiting for this whole COVID thing to go away so I could get back to helping pre- and post-transplant patients.
Wow. Well, you've certainly been a gift to us all and have been encouragement and watching. I said it earlier, your warrior type attitude about this. There are a lot of times when you, even when things couldn't get you down, you got put down, but you've continued to bounce back and you've continued to push through, and you've been hit from so many directions. There's a few more we won't even mention, as far as, just health situations that have come up and gone, but you continue to push forward. So I'm thankful that you're doing what you've done. Has recovery been easy? No, obviously that's no, absolutely it hasn't. But again, not so much of this has been heart related. So
correct.
That's definitely the blessing in this. Let me ask you a couple more questions here. First of all, just briefly, what would you say would be the best and the worst things that have come out of transplant for you? The best and the worst.
The best thing has been the relationships that I've made with other transplant recipients and donor families. I've become very close with a bunch of donor moms through our OPO, and that has just been amazing because I have not met my donor family, and to know these families who have, especially mothers who have lost their children, and their children were heroes through giving the gift of life. It's a very humbling experience to meet someone like that and befriend them and come to love them. And it just gives me more motivation to do more with my life.
For sure, yeah.
I have this overwhelming feeling to do more for others because of knowing these donor mothers. And I've made incredible friends with other transplant recipients. Unfortunately, several have passed away in the last year or so, and it's been difficult, but it's also a reality of transplant life. And for any of you who are either waiting for transplant or in the recovery process, none of this should give you doubt or deter you from the process. Everybody's experience is different, and I've learned through all of my hospitalizations and all of what I've been through that transplant life teaches you how to live with new normals. So while I was a cyclist and triathlete before transplant, I have gone back to cycling, and I've actually done a sprint triathlon post-transplant, but it's slower than I did before. And that's okay, because my body isn't where it used to be. And I've come to accept that it's okay if my body isn't where my mind thinks it should be. My mind needs to follow where my body is or is recovering to be. And having a positive outlook helps in that recovery and gives you a positive result.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you pointed that out. You would assume and expect from the outside, okay, we got a guy who's an athlete, he's all these, and so he's never going to be satisfied unless he's all that again. Well, you're every bit of that again. You're doing things in a little different way now, and you're accepting a little different now. I've got a good friend, not to compare you to apples for apples, but he was a cyclist himself, and the thing that he enjoyed doing was long runs. Long rides, 50, 60, 70 miles or what. He loved that, absolutely loved that. And then he faced leukemia, and he went through bone marrow transplant, and he had a tough road, different than ours, but a tough road for about a year. And now that he's back cycling, he might get a friend and ride 5 miles, and he says the scenery's better, the smile's just as big, and I know he doesn't have the capability he probably hoped he would, but he has definitely learned to enjoy the blessings and the opportunity that he does have. And I think you're doing that, and you're going to continue to work hard, obviously, but you're enjoying that. So that's definitely a positive.
Absolutely. And it's also having, at least for me, every day when I wake up, I'm grateful for seeing the green side of the grass, and to be able to wake up each day. And the first thing I do when I wake up is I thank my donor for the gift of life, and I say a prayer for his family.
Yes.
And then I look outside to make sure I'm above ground and seeing the green side of the grass instead of below ground, seeing the roots.
Well, again, you've been an inspiration. Anything negative, what will be the worst thing? I hate to flip it this way on you, but what will be the worst thing that you've experienced during the process?
The worst thing I've experienced, it's probably dealing with or adjusting to levels of pain that are unexpected. This is actually the absolute worst thing that I've been through of all of this. I've coded 6 times. I've had the transplant. I had an ejection fraction of 8 to 10. I almost didn't survive. And I was okay with it if I didn't survive. Oh, and by the way, right before going under sedation for my transplant, I asked if they played music, and they did. And the doctors put on Metallica, Enter Sandman for me. And they were blasting it super loud. So when I went under anesthesia, I was in a happy state of mind.
Right.
But the absolute worst thing that I've been through is having a catheter. Having a catheter to urinate through.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing.
Yeah, and
I'd rather get IVs or shots and cuts and poke and prod me anywhere. But the worst was having a catheter.
Yeah, you've had some horrible experiences with that, I can recall. But
Yeah.
well, then that's I'm gonna tell you, I don't want to take away from that from your side, but that's a good thing then. If that's the worst thing you've experienced has been that, not that it's not been horrible, but yeah. So that could be a negative for you, and I understand what you're saying for sure, but a positive for some others.
Yeah, because I've learned that my pain threshold when I was sick pre-transplant, my pain threshold now is probably 100 times higher.
Right.
So I can handle pain. It's not a problem. And you adjust to it, and you realize, or at least I realize, that if I'm feeling pain, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It means I'm alive and I'm fighting. And no matter what, there are people in worse positions than I'm in. On my worst day, it could still be better than others' best day.
Yeah. Yeah. And
that's something I'm incredibly grateful for.
Yes. And we learn that the hard way, unfortunately. But yeah, I always remember and try to remind myself of the days which I spent, walking around. And the key to what I'm about to say is walking around. But I would be in my bed at UAB waiting heart transplant and convinced that I must be in the worst shape ever. And, how could life get to this? And I'd get up and walk a lap, and I would look in the windows of some of the other rooms and think to myself, boy, you better straighten up. There's a lot of people here who's got it worse than you do. And there's always someone that way. And you named the dozens of IVs that you had at one point. There's someone worse than that. So, but you keep pushing.
At one point, I think I had pre-transplant. I had 13 different IVs, but they had a swan line in my neck,
right?
Which is this big line that go in through the main artery in your neck, and they had to tape to the pillow this. It looked like an erector set of ports that they plugged each of the IVs into. So I couldn't move my neck because there were 13 different IVs plugged in on the left side of my neck.
Yes, and if you have not seen something like that, it's just a huge reminder. First of all, you don't want to see it, but it's a huge reminder that nurses are angels and heroes. That's exactly what they are. The skill level that they have to manage that and to run that. I know I've seen rooms similar to what you're describing where there have been 2, maybe 3 nurses that are staffed just to stand at the end of the bed and manage all those IVs. And it's unbelievable, not only how resilient a person can be at times, but also how heroic others can be in trying to save a life like Mark's. And so that's just outstanding. Well, let me ask you for one more piece of advice is what it'll actually be. It's a question, but what would be the piece of advice you would give someone who's either waiting for transplant or maybe just shortly they're out, just came out of it?
Ask any question, no matter how silly you think it may be. And when you're asked, write down any question you think you might have, because you're probably going to have about 1,000 questions if you're pre-transplant. And there's no question that's too small to ask. You want to go into transplant as prepared as possible. even asking questions like, what's it like going under the anesthesia right before the operation? And what's it going to be like when you wake up after, when you're intubated? I was fortunate enough to have an anesthesiologist coach me on what it would be like when I would wake up after the transplant, so that I could be calm when I woke up intubated.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped. And I was totally calm. I wasn't worried that I had a tube in my throat because I knew it was going to happen. So my biggest advice is write down any question you can and have whoever your support is going to be it family, a loved one, a friend, have them write questions down as well. Because when you're pre-transplant, you may be focused on what's going to happen at transplant, but you're signing up for a lifetime deal.
Exactly.
And that includes taking your medications every day on time, not missing them. And I'm proud to say I've only been late taking a medication a handful of times, like maybe 6 or 7 times in 4.5 years have I been late by like an hour or so.
Excellent.
So it's like, write down any question. There are no dumb questions to ask, because, you know, this is going to be the rest of your life.
Right. And
it's going to be a great life.
That's outstanding advice, and that's a good point too. You're not just preparing for a day in a surgery or something. You're preparing for a lifetime of maintenance and upkeep and whatever else you want to call it. And asking those questions is huge.
Right.
This is one of those situations where knowledge is definitely power, and it definitely becomes your biggest superpower and your advantage when you have it. And so ask. Someone has been through it, and someone can help, I'll assure you. So, well, Mark, your journey has been tremendous. It's been long. When you add especially back into your father's situation, it's been a lot of years you've been involved in this. So you're a champion of information and experience and wisdom, and we appreciate you sharing your story with us today for sure.
It's my pleasure, Jim.
Well, Mark, thank you so much. And if anybody has any further questions, let me just point this out like I always would. If you've got any further questions, particularly for Mark, if you want to start dropping them in the comments below, or, you know, do some research. I have his information in the description. I'm sure he would be more than happy to help to provide you with some help and some assistance and be a mentor to you. That's what he enjoys and loves doing. And he's been a great inspiration for me and so many others. So I'm just excited that he was able to do this. But if you got any questions, please reach out. We'll help any way that we can.
I'm always available.
Mark is always available. Yep, he is. He hit me up just about, it's been about an hour ago now. He said, if you want to talk, I'm ready. And I had to get ready so I could catch up to him. But I'm excited that I've been able to do that. So thank you so much.
You could find me on Facebook and Instagram at A New Heart for Mark with the K. So A New Heart for Mark on both Facebook and Instagram, or my personal Facebook is Mark A. Barber.
Right. Go check those out. I'll try to link some of those in the description as well to make it a little bit easier, but go check those out. Definitely some great pages to follow. Not only to keep in touch with Mark, but to see some of the things that he's involved in, some of the events that he's a part of, and definitely an encouragement to see. But thank you so much for being with me today, Mark, and to all of you, thank you so much for joining us as well. Stay stronger, friends.